10 years later, 3 Apache women reveal their incredible proposal to the man who saved them. The memories from that day, ash and smoke twisting through the air like dark ribbons, haunted Lila every waking moment. 10 years since the fire that consumed her childhood, and yet the grief felt as fresh as the day she emerged from the ashes. As she stood in her small sunlit studio, paintbrush in hand, her heart clenched with a mixture of hope and dread. What if their decision to reach out to Jake after all these years only revealed his absence? The man who saved them seemed lost to time, just like parts of herself. She questioned the extent of their shared bond. Were they truly family now, or just strangers connected by an emotional fracture that remained unhealed? Tasha's phone buzzed on the worn-out table as she adjusted her scrubs, a constant reminder of the fragility of life she grappled with each day. Each patient she helped, each tiny victory, brought a sense of purpose, yet the weight of the past lingered. She often found herself caught between wanting to heal others and unraveling the pain that still gnawed at her. When their shared memories of Jake surfaced, she felt an urgency to remember him as the brave protector, yet a part of her whispered that he might just break their fragile peace. The shadows of doubt loomed larger, marring the bright certainty she wore like armor. Mia paced in her classroom, each step echoing her indecision. The books that lined her shelves overflowed with courage and hope, the teaching she wanted to impart. Yet, the thought of confronting the truth about Jake, about the man who had once inspired her to dream, sent waves of anxiety crashing over her. Was he a hero, or merely a man driven by a desire to save? What if he had his own wounds, his own regrets? The possibility of his return filled her with equal parts excitement and torment. Would he seek forgiveness? Or had he come to embody the loss they all carried? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The 3 women met at the crumbling community center. They stood amid the ghosts of laughter and joy that once filled the halls. Their plan, spurred by nostalgia and longing to honor Jake, felt heavier with each passing moment. Lila's vision for art was colliding with Tasha's call to action. Mia's educational ambitions strained under the weight of their intertwining dreams. It was almost unbearable. Would they each have to sacrifice their paths for a man whose memory they didn't fully understand? The tension that simmered between them threatened to erupt, leaving their stories fragmented and unresolved. Just as they began to voice their ambitions, a single text appeared on Mia's phone. The trembling of her hands spoke volumes, a tremor of fear mixed with an ember of hope. The message contained Jake's whereabouts, his battles, his secrets. This revelation cast an unforgiving light on everything they thought they understood. Would they find in him the answers they craved, or the buried pain they desperately hoped to avoid? The air thickened around them, anticipation curling like smoke. Could they confront the man who once anchored them? And could they face the weight of his truth head-on? As Lila stared at the glowing screen of Mia's phone, the words electrified the atmosphere. They ignited a rush of emotions that collided within her. Fear, anticipation, regret. It felt as if the choice they had each made to reconnect was suddenly trapped beneath the weight of this new knowledge. Jake was alive, and the past came crashing back like a summer storm. Tasha's brow furrowed as she leaned closer. What does it say? Is it him? Mia took a breath that trembled in her chest, running a finger over the words that seemed to dance in her vision. He's in another town. He's been working with local fire departments. She hesitated, wrestling with the visceral pull of old grief and budding hope. But what does that mean for us? Lila's voice rang out, steady yet choked with anxiety. Do we reach out? Are we prepared for what this means? Mia's hands shook, but she steadied them. We wanted answers, didn't we? Maybe this is our chance. But what if he's not who we remember? What if he's changed? As the shadows of doubt curled around them once more, Lila stepped back, needing physical space to navigate the flood of emotions. Her studio, the walls adorned with unfinished canvases, felt like a sanctuary filled with unexpressed colors of her anguish and hope. What if art could be a bridge to the truth? She envisioned the storytelling through her painted brush, using color to dive into the complexities of their bond with Jake. Perhaps confronting her past would unearth not only answers, but also a rekindling of her artistic purpose. With renewed determination, Lila spoke. "We have to meet him. We owe it to ourselves, and to him, to face this together." Tasha regarded Lila with a mix of admiration and fear, recognizing the weight that decision contained. "And if he's not the man we thought he was, Lila? What if the truth only brings more pain?" Lila met Tasha's gaze, resolute. "Then we'll learn to carry that pain, just like we've carried everything else. We've come this far." Mia, the educator at heart, considered the implications of knowledge and understanding. But what if he's not ready to confront us? What if he needs healing too? The collective silence echoed the indeterminate nature of their next steps. Uncertainty wrapped around them like a heavy shroud, yet beneath it, a spark ignited, an unspoken agreement that they needed to face not just each other, but themselves too. Days turned into a whirlwind of contemplation. Each woman approached the idea differently, isolating themselves within their complexities. Lila worked feverishly on her canvas, pouring out fears, memories, each stroke a silent scream for clarity. She painted Jake as a beacon in the storm, haunted but brave, a figure with both light and shadow. With each color she used, she painted the pain of the past, but also the resilience to seek a brighter truth. Meanwhile, Tasha's shifts at the hospital resonated with heightened urgency. She dove into her work, testing her own resolve with every patient encounter, reminding herself that healing was a two-way street. When she allowed her thoughts to wander, her mind lingered on Jake's face, the boy who had saved them. She questioned if he needed her, if he could even recognize the healer she had become. And Mia, feeling the pressure of her teaching responsibilities, began crafting a curriculum that addressed not only academics, but the emotional intelligence required to handle crises. She created lessons inspired by their shared past, prompting her students to explore their stories and articulate their fears. The urge to impart hope clashed against her lingering fear of failure. On the day they finally prepared to meet Jake, Lila felt the culmination of her creative energy and professional growth. The three of them stood outside the modest fire station, their breaths mingling in the cool morning air. They were linked by an umbilical cord of strength cultivated through years of navigating sorrow and skepticism. What would happen when the past collided with the present? Would they be able to weave their lives into something new, or would the truth sever their bonds forever? Before they stepped inside, Lila grasped her brush tightly, an invisible talisman against the uncertainties that lay ahead. The moment had come to face the man who had saved them, but lurking in the corners of their minds was the haunting question. Would he still be the hero they remembered, or had the fires forged someone unrecognizable? The door creaked open, and the scent of smoke mingled with freshly polished equipment greeted them. Lila felt her heart race, each beat echoing the uncertainty swirling in her chest. They stepped inside, each woman holding a breath steeped in nerves and nostalgia. The fire station was a sacred space, a memory vault littered with echoes of laughter and the weight of loss. "Are you ready?" Mia whispered, her voice barely cutting through the charged air. Lila nodded, but inside, doubt gnawed at her resolve. She was not just confronting Jake, she was exposing fissures in her own identity. The artist, the survivor, the friend, who was she now? A question gripped her mind more fiercely than the fear of Jake's potential transformation. Who was she without the past? As they moved deeper into the station, they spotted him, a man with sun-kissed skin and eyes that spoke of stories untold. At first glance, he appeared as handsome as he had been, but something was different, something Lila couldn't quite place. He looked older, more weighed down by life's realities. "Jake," Mia called out, her voice now calm, resolute. It was an invitation, a signal of their unity. He turned, and the shock that registered on his face mirrored the emotions swirling within Lila. Recognition, confusion, and a hint of vulnerability played over his features, making him feel both distant and close. "Hey," he replied, the word fragile, yet full of life, a thread between their worlds. The air thickened as they exchanged cautious glances. Lila felt an instinctive urge to reach out and pull him back into their shared history, to paint over the years with vibrant hues of understanding and forgiveness. But how could she expose the essence of her spirit when her own self seemed fragmented? "We came because," Lila began, but the words tangled in her throat. Fear of rejection felt paralyzing. She wondered if her desire to reconnect would only lead to more heartache. "We need to talk." Tasha took a step forward, her straightforwardness contrasting Lila's inner turmoil. "About everything." "Like how everything changed after that night?" Jake's voice deepened, laced with an ache that felt all too familiar. "Trust me, I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in the story now." He needed to be pulled back into the fabric of their lives, Lila realized. And yet, how could he re-enter when so much had changed, not just for him but for them too? She thought of the murky paint still drying on her canvas, colors blurring together, an image she hadn't yet captured. Mia took advantage of the moment. "We've all been through so much. There are things we need to confront, but more than that, we need to understand one another." That word, understand, echoed in Lila's mind, underlining the gap that still existed between them. Could they really bridge the distance of 10 years? Could her art find a voice in this new reality, or was it destined to fade like an unfinished painting? Jake's gaze softened, then hardened. "I didn't come back to face the ghosts. I came back to find some peace, some grounding." The challenge unfurled in the atmosphere, electric and terrifying. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her brush still in her pocket, a reminder of who she was and who she had yet to become. If Jake was feeling lost, perhaps sharing their journeys could illuminate a path forward for all of them. Lila steeled herself, ready to rewrite their narratives, eager to divulge the complexities they had faced. "What if we share our truths?" she suggested, her heart pounding in hopeful unison with her words. "What if we create a new story together?" Jake's expression shifted, revealing a flicker of unresolved pain mingled with intrigue. "Are you sure? Because what I have to share might change how you see me." The stakes elevated. It wasn't merely about Jake. It was about the growth they had undertaken without him. Would this confrontation bring them closer, or would it strip them bare, unveiling wounds they had all kept hidden? As Lila looked into Jake's searching eyes, she sensed the shift that might redefine everything: her art, her relationships, her very existence. She was on the precipice of discovering more than answers. She was poised to uncover profound revelations about herself she hadn't anticipated. But beyond the prospect of healing lay an unsettling thought. What if the truths they exchanged would shatter the bonds they fought so hard to maintain? Would they survive the unraveling, or would this connection sever the threads of their past forever? The answers loomed in the shadows, and as they stood at the crossroads, Lila realized that the confrontation was merely the beginning of an even greater reckoning. Lila's heart drummed louder, drowning out the distant chatter of sirens echoing from the station doors. She focused on Jake, his familiar presence now wrapped in an air of uncertainty. The gravity of their shared history pressed down on her, compelling her to articulate the thoughts swirling violently inside her. "You have to understand, it's not just about you coming back," she started, her voice stronger than she felt. "We've changed, and I think we need to figure out how that affects all of us now." Jake's silence was palpable, and Lila's mind raced. Did he comprehend her struggle? With every second of hesitation, her resolve battled against a tide of self-doubt. The painter in her wanted to canvas the emotions, but the woman behind the brush grappled with her fragmented self-image. "It's like I've been painting on the edges of what I truly feel. I'm here, but I feel lost in the colors." Vulnerability lurked in her statement, sharp and unyielding. Would he see her? Would he understand the depth of her scars? Mia stepped in, sensing the tension building. "We're here to rebuild, to be honest about everything, even the parts that hurt." Her eyes found Tasha's, and they shared a silent agreement. Lila caught a glimpse of hope in Jake's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a shadow. "I'm not the hero you remember," he muttered, the admission tasting bitter on his tongue. "I came back with heavy baggage, and I don't want to drag you down with me." Those words struck Lila like a sudden gust of wind. Did he not realize that his return was the catalyst she desperately needed? She exhaled slowly, feeling the tight knots in her stomach unfurl just a little. "We can carry it together. Doesn't that sound better?" A spark of something flickered in Jake's expression. Curiosity, or perhaps a faint glimmer of hope. Still, he remained guarded, weighing her offer against the weight of his secrets. What if I told you I've been struggling too? I don't know what tomorrow looks like, and I'm not the artist I used to be either, she pressed on, her voice laced with urgency. But maybe by sharing our truths, we can paint a new future. Jake's gaze shifted, locking with hers. It was as if he were considering her proposal for the first time, an opportunity for redemption shrouded in uncertainty. Yet just as quickly as it emerged, the flicker of connection dimmed. Maybe we can share our truths, he conceded, his tone uncertain. But what if those truths are more than we bargained for? What if they tear apart the fabric of our friendship? Lila shivered at the thought, but she felt the fire of determination igniting within her. Then we must have the courage to face the consequences. We can't live in shadows anymore. Tasha nodded, her support like a steady heartbeat in the room. It's about facing the darkness instead of letting it consume us. None of us are heroes here. We're just people trying to make sense of what happened. A hush fell over the station, amplifying the tumult of Lila's thoughts. She could feel the weight of their collective damage. It wrapped around them like clingy smoke. Jake took a deep breath, finally seeming to confront the demons he'd clung to. Okay, he whispered. Let's start with the night of the fire. It's time we shed the masks we've been wearing. Lila felt an electric charge course through her body. This moment could either shatter their fragile alliance or solidify their connections. It was a gamble, one that held the promise of rebirth and creativity, but also the risk of mutual destruction. Before we begin, Lila interjected, sensing the precariousness of their resolve, we need to promise one another that we won't shy away from the difficult truths, no matter how painful. Jake's eyes darkened, his vulnerability visible. Can you keep that promise? Can you? Lila challenged, her will ignited. This was the moment she had both craved and feared. A solemn understanding passed between them. Embracing the unknown meant facing their pasts and the raw, unyielding truths that could emerge. As they braced for an unraveling of buried fears, Lila knew that the confrontation ahead was just the beginning of her journey, a path she hadn't fully mapped out. And still lingering in the back of her mind was that unsettling thought. Would these truths bind them as they stepped into the light? Or would they plunge into the void of their individual demons? With a deep breath, she exhaled the hesitation lingering inside her. The canvas awaited, ready to absorb the chaos of their stories. As she prepared to paint their reunion, she couldn't shake the premonition that this moment might lead to the most profound revelation yet, one she had never anticipated. What could remain hidden in the shadows as they dared to shine light on the darkness? And with that question hung heavy in the air, Lila knew they were teetering on the edge of a turning point. Lila's breath hitched in her throat as Jake nodded slowly, the weight of acknowledgement settling in the space between them. The flickering overhead lights seemed to pulse in time with her pounding heart, each throb a reminder of the significance of this moment. Okay, let's start with the night of the fire, Jake repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with the heaviness of burden. Lila felt a knot unfurl in her chest, both a release and an invitation to navigate the uncharted waters of their shared trauma. As Jake began to recount the harrowing details of that night, Lila focused on his voice, the way it trembled as he shyly peeled back the layers of his shame. It was raw and deep, bringing forth a wave of memories that she had buried beneath her own brushstrokes. I remember the fire like it was yesterday, he began, his hands working nervously at his side. The smoke, the screams, I thought... He faltered, the words caught somewhere between guilt and fear. I thought I could save everyone. The truth of his admission struck Lila profoundly. Jake had carried this scar, this belief that he had failed them for far too long. In confronting their history, he was not just peeling back layers of the past, he was revealing the charred edges of his very identity. It stirred something within her, a sense of urgency to share her own vulnerabilities. I was so wrapped up in my art after that, she interjected, her voice steady but resonating with the weight of her truth. I thought painting would give me an escape, but... She hesitated, bracing herself for the plunge. But it only deepened my isolation. I lost myself in shadows just like you did. Jake's gaze flickered toward her, vulnerability softening the sharp lines of his jaw. She could feel the vulnerability in the space they created together, charged with unspoken acceptance. Perhaps we're both looking for the same thing, he replied, his tone shifting. Redemption, connection. Lila's mind raced, and with it came an unexpected epiphany. It's more than redemption, Jake. It's honesty. We need to be truthful with ourselves to reclaim who we are. The realization washed over her, a transformative moment that felt both liberating and intimidating. As they continued to share their confessions, Lila's memories ignited vivid emotions, pain, loss, and the simmering desire for healing. Each truth was like a brushstroke on her canvas, blending colors of despair and hope into a melding that felt new and raw. Just when she thought they had reached a pivotal juncture, the door swung open and Mia entered with Tasha. Their faces were etched with a mix of trepidation and determination, a silent reminder of the collective wounds they shared. "Sorry to interrupt," Mia said, but urgency crept into her voice. "We need to make this a group effort. It's not just about us anymore." Lila's heart quickened. She had braced for the upheaval of her own truths, not the additional voices impinging upon their fragile alliance. She felt a swell of resistance rise within her. Wasn't this about her rediscovery? But Mia's words echoed the core of Lila's understanding. They all carried their individual burdens and potential for healing. "You're right," she conceded slowly, the realization dawning that honesty could only flourish in a unified space, not one mired in isolation. As they exchanged glances, Lila felt the room swell with possibilities, moments filled with hope or perhaps of devastating revelations yet to come. She could sense the growing tension, the electric anticipation of conversations that could reshape their futures, intertwined yet magnificently separate. "How do we do this?" Tasha asked, her eyes steady, reflecting the turmoil teetering beneath the surface. It was a question indeed without easy answers, but Lila felt a surge of clarity. "We do it fearlessly," Lila said, channeling her painter's spirit. "We lay it all out, our pain, our truths, our aspirations, one brushstroke at a time." Each exchange became a vivid narrative, a mosaic of their lives leading towards something beautiful yet daunting. Lila's conviction heightened, her identity shaping anew with the realization that her art played a pivotal role in this renewal. As they gathered around the large communal table, the air thick with unspoken intentions, Lila's mind buzzed with excitement and trepidation. What were they about to unveil in this fragile exploration of truth? And could they bear the risk of everything unraveling in order to find a greater connection? With shared anticipation, they positioned themselves for their collective revelations, ready to confront not only the past, but also their identities forged anew. Uncertainty loomed, stronger than before, yet a flicker of hope fought its way into the foreground. The moment had come to transform pain into purpose, but could they embrace the complexity of that transformation? And as the realization of their next step sank in, Lila's heart quickened. What would emerge from this collective effort of weaving their stories together? Would they find strength, or would they falter when faced with the specter of memories long hidden? Lila's pulse echoed in her ears as she gathered her thoughts, feeling the intensity of the moment swell around her, each person sharing in the weight of their collective burdens. The table felt expansive, but in that space, it also housed the fear that grasped her stomach. "We can start by sharing what we've been carrying," she suggested, meeting the eyes of each woman seated across from her. A flicker of hesitation lingered in Mia's expression, while Tasha's fingers danced nervously over her notepad. Mia broke the silence first. "I've spent years blaming myself for not being able to save others. After the fire, it felt like every choice I made was a burden to carry," she revealed, her voice trembling yet resolute. Lila instinctively leaned forward, entranced by Mia's honesty. She felt a kinship that transcended words, a shared understanding that flooded a hidden part of her soul. As Mia spoke, Lila experienced a strange blend of emotions stirring within her, admiration layered with empathy, and a slight pang of guilt for her own reluctance to dive deeply into her past without the artistic facade. How had she hidden behind her paintbrush for so long? What truths lay dormant within her that she had yet to confront? Tasha, sensing the vulnerability in the air, added, "My art feels fragmented. I'm constantly chasing this idea of perfection, scared to paint anything that doesn't fit within a specific frame." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "But when I paint, it's like I'm inviting my demons into the room. It terrifies me." Lila felt that gut-punch realization as Tasha's words struck a chord. The fear of imperfection had echoed through her artistic journey too, her strokes becoming an escape while simultaneously entangling her deeper in self-doubt. Each confession laid bare their shared burdens, feeding a collective need, a truth that she had once buried in the depths of her paintings. It's not just about confronting our trauma, it's about reclaiming our narratives, Lila interjected, her voice suddenly steady and commanding, dispelling the chaotic whirl of their past. Let's paint our stories not to escape them, but to embrace them, flaws and all. The other women looked at her, their expressions shifting into tentative hope. The empowering rhythm of emerging stories began to envelop them. They were no longer just survivors locked in the remnants of their past. They were artists desperate to carve meaning from their chaos. With each word exchanged, Lila felt a piece of herself rekindle yet again. The spark that had flickered through her art started to blaze as she envisioned creating a joint project that encapsulated their shared trauma, resilience, and healing. What if their personal truths infused a transformative piece of art, one that illustrated not only struggle but also the strength that emerged from it? Let's create something that's honest, Lila proposed, glancing around the table. A collaborative piece that blends our experiences into one living canvas. Mia nodded eagerly, a spark igniting in her eyes. Tasha's previously withdrawn posture straightened a bit. Hope and curiosity were woven into their becoming. It wasn't merely about making art anymore. It was about making meaning, weaving their stories together to carve a future less solitary and more intertwined. Yet even as excitement buzzed among them, an underlying tension lingered, a nagging doubt about whether they could truly bear the depths of their past without shattering altogether. Could they maintain their individuality while becoming part of a collective expression? It's not just about putting paint on a canvas, is it? Tasha murmured, searching Lila's face for affirmation, fear glimmering in her pupils. It's about confronting more than what we've lost. It's about painting the whole spectrum. Yes, Lila replied slowly, grappling with the implications of that truth. They were ready to dive deeper, which would require profound vulnerability. Would they dare confront the fragilities of their existence? As they began discussing colors and themes, Lila's pulse quickened with urgency. This was uncharted territory, both exciting and terrifying. Together, they would venture into realms of emotional depth they hadn't dared face before. But in that moment, another thought tugged at the edges of her mind. What would happen when they exposed their vulnerabilities too much? Would their bonds hold together, or would the process itself fray their trust? The question loomed heavily as she began to sketch the first outline of their collective vision. Was this decision to merge their stories the key to healing, or the risk of losing what made each of them whole? And as the night wore on, shrouded in flickering candlelight, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that one revelation would shift the course of their journey. Who would lead the expression if this collaborative art became their undoing? Lila sat at the table, her sketch barely drafted on the paper but already pulsing with the weight of unspoken truths. The outlines of her ideas began to blur with the shapes of her emotions. It was thrilling, this new venture, but it also felt precarious. Each woman, with her own trauma, was an intricate thread in the tapestry they were about to weave. The power of their individual narratives was undeniable, yet it presented an uncomfortably vulnerable undertaking, the act of exposing the rawness of what lay beneath their skin. As Mia recounted stories of the fire, Lila felt the air thicken with emotion. Each word released an echo of her own memories, stifled breath from experiences she had long neglected. How could she lead this project while grappling with her own fears of confronting the deepest parts of herself? The need to succeed felt heavier with every passing moment, stifling her usual artistic freedom. Let's start by choosing colors that resonate with our experiences, Lila suggested, her voice steadier than she felt. They began to select palettes that represented their individual and collective journeys. Mia chose deep reds, signifying pain and courage, while Tasha opted for muted blues, embodying calmness amidst the chaos. Lila thought of the vibrant yellows she had always favored, symbolizing joy, but hesitated to admit how emptiness often cloaked that brightness. This project wouldn't be defined merely by aesthetics. It would delve into emotional depths they each fought to navigate, yet the fear of misrepresenting her emotions haunted her. What if the colors she chose failed to convey her truth? What if the weight of their shared narratives crushed her? Mia, Lila said, forcing her voice out as she saw her co-collaborator's deep reflection. How do you feel about incorporating the imagery of the fire? It was such a pivotal moment for you, and perhaps it could guide us in imbuing urgency within our work. Mia's brow furrowed thoughtfully. It was destructive, but it also forged a new beginning. The realization dawned as she spoke, her eyes locking onto Lila's. This was about more than just an act of creation. They were aiming to portray rebirth, resilience, yet doubt lingered in Lila's heart. Could they truly create art that felt whole and honest? The pressure of leading them into this emotional unraveling weighed on her. She couldn't shake off the feeling of inadequacy, the worry that her own ghost, her unexamined past, could impact the integrity of their collective voice. There's something thrilling, Tasha added, her voice hesitant but gaining strength, in the unknown possibilities as much as the truths. What if painting through these colors reveals revelations we didn't expect? Exactly, Lila responded, trying to invigorate her own resolve as much as Tasha's. But lurking doubts about being the vessel for their stories bubbled within her. Was she ready to expose her own truths? As they sketched out the outlines and choices became focal points of discussion, Lila realized she couldn't hide any longer. The hesitation that had shackled her to silence in the past ringed louder than ever. This collaboration demanded more than technical skill. It required emotional transparency and a willingness to embrace imperfection. Maybe we should all share one piece of ourselves that we're afraid to paint, Lila suggested, her pulse quickening at the prospect of vulnerability. Can we share the colors of our shame or guilt? The brushstrokes that have not yet seen daylight? If we paint what terrifies us, we may find freedom in the act. The room fell silent, the flicker of candlelight casting trembling shadows on their faces. Hesitation morphed into palpable tension. Fear mirrored in each woman's eyes seemed to amplify Lila's internal dread. What if they exposed too much? Would their relationship shatter under the weight of rawness? Sounds risky, Mia finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But perhaps that's the only way forward. Lila remained put, reflecting on her proposal. Should she initiate this journey into the unknown, risking more than she was prepared to give? In this critical moment, she faced a moral dilemma. Was she ready to confront her own shadows alongside her comrades? So many choices led to this moment. As the discussion stretched through the night, Lila sensed there was no turning back. Each confession would act as brushstrokes on a canvas representing their convergence, unveiling both beauty and fragility. But one certainty resided in her mind. The risk of stepping into the depths of vulnerability was their only path to authentic expression, yet it loomed menacingly ahead. The question remained, could they collectively withstand the storm of revelations, or would the unveiling tear them apart? And with that thought, Lila turned to her canvas, the first courageous stroke trembling as she wondered what true expression demanded of her next. Lila took a deep breath, her mind a whirlpool of anticipation and anxiety as the first stroke met the canvas. The texture resisted her brush, just as her doubts resisted her creativity, but the colors began to emerge, albeit with an occasional hesitation. Each stroke was a confrontation, a rebellion against her fears that clamored for her to retreat into safety. There was a glimmer of liberation in expressing even a hint of the chaos swirling inside her. Her fellow artists were absorbed in their own journeys, the atmosphere dense with emotional exploration. Mia's red was a fiery catharsis, illustrating moments of grief and resilience. Tasha's blues shimmered with the calmness she sought amid her chaotic reality, blending seamlessly into blobs of deeper indigo, each hue a silent reminder of her scars. Lila admired their courage, silently questioning her own. Lila, Mia's voice cut through her thoughts, laced with a challenge. What are you afraid will emerge from your paint? If we're bearing our truth, so must you. The spotlight turned sharp on her, and her heart raced. The weight of vulnerability pressed harder. I don't know if I have the same strength, she replied, avoiding direct eye contact. Your stories are so vivid. But you have a story too, don't you? Tasha's voice was gentle yet firm, urging her to confront the barrier she had built. We can only move forward together. The challenge rippled through Lila's consciousness. Could she truly lay bare a truth that had been buried for so long? What revelations had she cast aside in her artist journey? Maybe, Lila proposed hesitantly, I could start with a color that feels more like a brushstroke of guilt than joy. Their gazes turned expectant, and she felt the heat of their support bolster her resolve. Yellow, she said, almost as if testing the word. Because it feels bright, but often it masks where I feel hollow. The joy is like a facade over the darker edges of my worries. A silence enveloped the room, not oppressive but contemplative. They were threading her fears into the collective narrative. The camaraderie felt undeniable, yet her mind strained under the contrast between their artistic strength and her own insecurities. The four walls seemed to pulse with energy. Lila dipped her brush, a metaphoric glance at her inadequacy. With each stroke of yellow, she poured out snippets of her past. Memories flashed in her mind. The off-kilter moments that shaped her, betrayals, lost friendships, and the lingering smoke from her own unresolved fire. What was she doing? Here she stood, shackled by her own past while demanding emotional exposure from others. How could she lead when her own flame flickered uncertainly? Mia, Tasha, Lila spoke slowly, pushing through the fog of doubt. I think I'm afraid that if I share too much, it'll overwhelm our narrative. I'm scared of collapsing under the weight of it all. Mia's response was immediate. But isn't that the art? To embrace the overwhelming and still emerge on the other side? Lila had to ponder this. Art was supposed to provoke, to pull forth unspoken truths, and their collaboration was a testament to that belief. But the risks felt so high. What if her vulnerabilities resounded in disaster rather than discovery? I suppose we can embrace the chaos together, she finally admitted, a rising determination buoying her spirit. What if the turbulence is exactly what makes the art resonate? The room hummed with newfound energy, their journeys intertwining as they embraced the risks. They became more than individuals, each story a thread woven into an intricate design, hanging delicately between strength and fragility. As Lila turned back to her canvas, the emotions ignited anew. She dipped the brush back into that stark yellow with a bit more fervor, allowing pieces of her rawness to bleed into the fabric of the artwork. But in the ebb and flow of creation, doubt lingered, dancing just beyond the edges of her sharpening resolve. Would unveiling these fears solidify their relationship or tear it apart? Would her specter of inadequacy lead them into genuine expression or overshadow their collaboration entirely? With a final stroke, Lila created a sunburst at the heart of the canvas, a visceral representation of her fears mingling with hope. It was terrifying yet exhilarating. The moment settled, but within her a new uncertainty surfaced. What if this only scratched the surface of her shadows? Soon, they would face discussions more arduous than paint selections and emotional colors. Next session, let's paint our darkest fears, Lila said decisively, the words igniting the air. What do you mean? Mia asked, a blend of intrigue and apprehension. Lila smiled faintly, knowing the storm that would ensue from her invitation. Only by risking this could we uncover what really lies beneath. The challenge loomed ahead, a confrontation with their deepest fears, echoing through the looming canvas that would soon serve not only as an artistic expression, but also as a testament to their internal struggles. And as anticipation filled the air, Lila felt her resolve harden. What lay ahead was murky but undeniably essential. Would they have the courage to confront the darkness, or would it shatter their creative bond? In this uncharted territory, Lila sensed a crossroad emerging, a defining moment that would either reaffirm their strength or unveil their metaphorical fragility, and right now, she stood on the cusp of transformation. The next session arrived far too quickly, the air thick with expectation. As Layla pushed through the door into the studio, the overhead lights buzzed softly, illuminating the blank canvases waiting to be filled with shadows of their fears. Leela inhaled deeply, a mix of determination and trepidation coursing through her veins. This was it, the moment to dive into the dark waters she had only skimmed before. Mia and Tasha were already there, their canvases prepped, but the tension was palpable. Both artists wore expressions that combined apprehension with something akin to excitement. It was a reflection of the shared challenge they had agreed upon. Their darkest fears waited to be unearthed. Each was a guardian of their own unspeakable truths, and Lila felt the weight of that responsibility pressing down on her. Okay, let's do this, Lila said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's start by sharing what we plan to paint. I think it'll help us process this together." After a brief pause, Mia broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. "I want to paint the feeling of abandonment, the idea that even in a crowded room I feel invisible." Her admission hung in the air, heavy with resonance. Lila's heart twisted at the vulnerability displayed. She recognized the shadow of Mia's experience lurking behind those words. Tasha nodded slowly, taking the cue. "Mine is about failure. It's a fear that clings to every ambition I have. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fall short?" A silence filled the space, a communal acknowledgement of the monsters they were squaring off against. Then Lila's turn came, undoing her carefully constructed walls. "I think I want to paint the fear of never being seen as an artist," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "What if every stroke I make is just a reminder of how far I am from where I want to be?" The honesty felt liberating yet terrifying. As they shared their fears, Lila began to understand that each one was a reflection of something profoundly human, a shared struggle that bound them, even if it left them vulnerable. The brushes creaked against the canvas, each stroke an explosion of color forged in the rawness of their truths. Lila painted a storm, angry reds and deep blacks swirling together as she fought to solidify her emotions. With every flick of her wrist, she confronted the lurking doubts that taunted her constantly. Yet, as the colors melded together, the shadows grew heavier, almost suffocating. Sweat beaded on Lila's brow, and she paused, her heart racing. What if this darkness consumed her? Mia's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "Lila, don't let it take you under. Remember, this pain is part of your journey, and facing it makes it all the more meaningful." The encouragement ignited something in Lila. Perhaps this was the very core of their collaboration, to not only create art, but to confront adversity and emerge stronger. She picked up her brush again, this time with fervor, and added splashes of bright yellow over the stormy hues. It was a reminder that hope could exist alongside fear. Light could permeate the darkest of storms. As they painted, Lila noticed the others were beginning to expose not just their fears, but the vibrant humanity interwoven within those fears. Mia had transformed her dark anonymity into a figure amid the shadows, and Tasha had crafted a staircase ascending toward a luminous horizon. The session flowed, a rhythmic pulse of creation and emotional release. But beneath the surface, Lila felt a growing unease, questions gnawing at her focus. Had they scraped the surface enough to truly confront their fears? How deep did the roots of their struggles go? With one final stroke, she stepped back to survey her work. The canvas was overwhelming, chaotic yet brimming with potential. The darkness coexisted with the brightness, embodying her fears but also celebrating her courage. Yet the question remained, what lay beyond this created realm? Facing these fears together had bound them, but was it enough to keep their collective strength intact? "Next week, let's bring a piece of our past," Lila said suddenly, the idea crystallizing in her mind. "Let's paint something from our history, an event, a moment that solidifies those fears even more." The statement broke the tranquility, fresh tension weaving through the group. Lila's invitation felt risky, potentially dangerous. Would they be able to delve even deeper without losing their footing? With her heart pounding, she glanced around, anticipation thrumming beneath her skin. Could they really peel back the layers of their pasts? The artist in her couldn't wait to find out. But below the surface of her excitement lay a ripple of fear. What if familiarity with pain stirred more than inspiration? What if their darkest moments threatened to fracture the very connection they had fought so hard to build? Lila stood on the cusp of yet another transformation, unease stirring within her. The journey into the truth of her past was about to begin, and she would need every ounce of courage. Would she emerge intact, or would they find themselves lost among shadows once more? The studio buzzed with anticipation as Lila, Mia, and Tasha gathered for their next session, yet an undercurrent of trepidation rippled through the air. The notion of unveiling a piece of their past loomed ominously, a portal into vulnerabilities they had only begun to explore. Lila stood by her canvas, its vibrant strokes now infused with emotional depth, yet beneath it lay her own insecurities and questions about their journey ahead. "Are we truly ready for this?" Lila asked, the words escaping her mouth before she could consider filtering them. to share something that shaped our fears? Mia took a breath, her resolve piercing the thick atmosphere. If we're going to paint something real, we must start at the root. It's time to confront the scars with honesty. Lila met Mia's gaze, a comforting solidarity solidifying between them. Yet her mind echoed with silent questions. Were they all prepared for the volatility of such raw discussion? "I'll start," Tasha said, her voice steady as she pulled out a small box from her bag. It opened to reveal a faded photograph of a family picnic, smiles captured amid sun-drenched laughter. "This is from the summer before the fire. I remember thinking life was perfect, thinking I could be someone, and then everything changed." As she recounted the moment, Lila felt the emotional resonance in Tasha's words. Fear intertwined with nostalgia as Tasha connected to the pain of loss. Lila sensed the gravity of Tasha's storytelling. This was more than a memory. It was a fracture point that defined her journey. Mia spoke next, revealing an old article from her school newspaper. "I wrote about fire safety for a project. I wanted to be a hero in my own right, but I've felt anything but since that night," she admitted, a tremor in her voice as she revealed how her protector's instinct transformed into guilt. Lila's heart clenched. The weight of their histories evolved into a quilt of shared emotions, threading them closer together even as fear lurked at the edges. Now it was her turn, and the pressure grew heavier. It felt both exciting and daunting to pour out the truth. But fear sizzled beneath her surface. What would it look like to expose her most jagged edges? "After the fire, I used painting to escape," she began, her voice growing steadier as each word flowed. "I painted bright colors to hide my darkness. I guess I thought if I created something beautiful, I could ignore all the lurking shadows." She reflected on years spent masking turmoil behind vibrant creations, wondering if her brilliance overshadowed her cracks. The silence enveloped them, braided with understanding. "But it's those shadows I now realize define our art, the spaces we often fear to explore," Lila continued, her voice lifting subtly. "My past screams for acknowledgement, and so must yours." As they each painted their narratives into existence, a powerful synergy sparked between them. The air charged with urgency as they unleashed their brushstrokes. Perhaps the catharsis of confronting trauma became their anchor, a unified effort to reclaim the weight of their experiences. With determination flowing through her veins, Lila embraced the vulnerability that came with exposing her darkest moments. The stillness of the studio morphed into a canvas of metamorphosis, the brush meeting the paint with newfound vigor as they shared their raw truths. The collective revelations began painting the narrative beyond isolation. They began weaving a tapestry of resilience. "Tomorrow, we reveal these pieces to each other. We must own them," Lila declared with newfound confidence, electricity crackling through her words. They leaned into the challenge, the promise of growth driving them forward. As the day faded into night, Lila stood before her canvas, the weight of their shared truths anchoring her to this moment. This confrontation was a resurgence, each painted stroke reclaiming their identities and carving paths toward understanding. Her doubts transformed into certainty. This collaboration wasn't about vulnerability leading to defeat, but rather a powerful communion of healing. Their shared stories, the fire, the aftermath, the growth, created a bridge of solidarity. What lay ahead was no longer an exploration of fear, but rather an opportunity to rise from their ashes, illuminating the strength within their scars. With each brushstroke, their spirits soared. Lila stepped back to survey the canvas, feeling the burgeoning light igniting within her heart. The pieces of her identity, once fractured, began to align, right beside her companions as they prepared to traverse the gorge of their shared paths. Next, she realized, would be a reckoning as much with their art as with each other. Amid uncertainty, the resilience they nurtured seemed to emit strength beyond measure, and Lila found herself brimming with hope. As they contoured the final bits of their artwork, an intoxicating sense of accomplishment flooded the studio. They had faced what haunted them, and now was the time to illuminate the path ahead. Together, they triumphantly emerged from the darkness, more than survivors. They stood resolute as artists, advocates, and friends, forever transformed by the catharsis that came from confronting their pasts. The studio, once a mere space, had morphed into a sanctuary for healing, a memorial to their shared tenacity. Before conclusion, Lila faced her companions, a warm smile blossoming across her face, echoing sentiments they hadn't voiced. Through this journey, we've carved out our paths to healing. Let's celebrate our stories. Let's embrace the amalgamation of colors and dimensions we represent. With that, they stood united, ready to unveil their creations to the world, a celebration of resilience and the indomitable spirit that thrived beyond the ashes. As they anticipated the necessity of unveiling and sharing their newfound art with the community, Lila understood deep within her heart that their journey had just begun. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It's vital to our community's growth. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your insights mean everything to us. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this transformative tale. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.